This is an overview video explaining how to answer question 5 on paper 3. We'll be looking at what the examiner will be expecting and what you can do to score as many marks as you can. Now the question will always look like this. Suggest one reason why interpretations 1 and 2 give different views about a particular topic. You may use sources B and C to help explain your answer. 4 marks. All 4 marks here are awarded for AO4, which is your analysis of interpretations and their differences. Now you might remember that that is the same as it was for question 4. Now in question 4 we were asked, what is the difference between the interpretations? Question 5 is asking us, why is there a difference between the interpretations? So it's important that you take a moment to think about what is the difference between those questions. What are they asking you that's different? Essentially, it means that in question 5, you don't need to explain what the difference is. You've already done that, so the examiner won't award you any more marks for saying the same thing again. Really, you need to be focusing on why are they different. To explain why they're different, you can use the sources. The question tells you that you are allowed to do that. So if you can find a reason that brings in the sources somehow, then by all means go for it. Just make sure that you're explaining it clearly. Remember too, not to go into too much detail analysing the sources. Again, we've already done that in previous questions. So if you bring them in, just try and keep it concise and clear, and don't go into too much depth about what you think source A is arguing, what you think source B is arguing, what you think interpretation 1 and interpretation 2 are arguing. Otherwise you'll be writing forever and ever. So keep it focused, remember the topic given to you in the question, and keep everything relevant and clear and easy for the examiner to follow. Now let's take a look at the bands for this question. Now in the lower band, we're seeing words like valid but straightforward explanation. So maybe you've told them what your difference is, or why you think they're different, but you haven't really explained it very fully, and it's not really that clear to the examiner what it is that you're trying to get across. Little analysis, so again, you haven't maybe focused on the topic given to you in the question, you haven't explored why you think they're different in much detail. Also coming to the next point is that it's undeveloped, so maybe you've given a simple comment, I think they're different because X, but then why? So go into that a little bit more detail, really explain it fully. You might also have brought in some supporting information, but not maybe linked it back to the question, kept it relevant. It doesn't really enhance your argument. Let's take a look at an example for this question. This one says, suggest one reason why interpretations 1 and 2 give different views about the role Mal played in creating his cult of personality. You may use sources B and C to help explain your answer. 4 marks. Let's take a look at the mark scheme for this question. Now, the first idea here is that the interpretations might differ because they rely upon different sources, and this is your opportunity to bring in the sources like the question invited you to do. So, interpretation 1 might have been looking at source B, and source B depicted Mal as a great leader of the people. So, if you were to explain this fully, you would say that both interpretation 1 and source B have a similar focus and a similar emphasis and tone. They're both very positive and they've got that same sort of line of argument. So it's plausible that source B inspired interpretation 1. And then just to explain it on the other hand, so interpretation 2 might have focused on source C, again because of a similar tone, a similar emphasis, because source C highlights the role Mal himself played in building the personality cult. So there you can see we've thought about the arguments of both sources, the arguments of both interpretations, and we've made links between all of them and then linked it back to the topic given to us in the question. So that is a fantastic, fully developed answer, which is relevant, it's focused, it's analytical, and it ticks all the boxes. So certainly top band there. Another point that you could have made was that there are different foci. Now, by that we mean that the interpretations are focusing on different things. They're trying to argue very separate arguments. So it's difficult to compare them because they're not looking at a similar topic. So to explain that a little bit further, You can say that interpretation 1 focuses on the reasons for Mel's pursuit of a personality cult, whereas interpretation 2 is focusing on Mel's style of leadership. So we can't really make a direct comparison there, and that's why they differ. It's also important to note that the example warns against using things like authorship and time of production and context of writing as reasons for interpretations differing. That means they don't want you to look at the context in which the interpretation was produced. They want you to think about the content of the interpretation. That's because they tend to say that forming assumptions that things like time or circumstance of writing will affect the interpretation isn't really what they're looking for. They want you to focus on what the interpretations actually say and there make a judgment.